Welcome to this discussion about street epistemology. I'm getting an echo from somebody, so I may have to do something. If we edit this, again, I will say, welcome to this discussion about SE. Today, my guest is Ben Diesel, our famous epistemologist from South Africa. Ben, tell us what you've been doing. Tell us why I'm talking to you here today. Who are you?
Who am I? These serious questions that we're starting with. So I started my interest in street epistemology when I stumbled onto a video of Anthony Magnabosco and Aaron Ra going out to do street epistemology together. I was watching Aaron's channel, so that was a serious perspective shift for me, going from Aaron Ra, there's rah rah rah, very very serious, not angry, but
I'm a big fan of Aaron Ra. I like him.
I am absolutely.
Yeah, I do.
But to watch him do street epistemology is just a beautiful, beautiful wreck in slow motion. And Anthony's approach immediately caught my attention, because I've always been somebody who's believed that if you have a conviction, or if you believe something, you should be willing to stand by to try and convince other people. And that's led me to have conversations that don't turn out as well as I thought they would. I know you always think that if you've got the facts and good reasons on your side, you should be able to convince people. But that's not what you find when you have these types of conversations. So I jumped into Anthony's channels, over Anthony's channel, and discovered everybody else read deep discussions, street knowledge, all of those guys. And I think it was about 3 months after that when I decided, okay, I need to try this out. So I got my clipboard and a little stopwatch, and I headed out to a local university, and that's where everything started. And I haven't looked back since. It's been an amazing ride. So currently I'm not very active. I switched my focus to having more personal interactions. So after I started my YouTube channel, I joined a apologetics group as their local sit-in skeptic, and they've been very welcoming to me, and I've been there with a little thorn in their side, but they seem to enjoy it. And I also have a couple of.
You are a designated devil's advocate in an apologetics group.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, is this a narrowly tailored apologetics group, like a specific denomination, or is it what's their scope?
It's a ratio Christi group. People who know about apologetics might be familiar with it. It's a global student apologetics effort, it seems like.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very inclusive apologetics group. Okay,
yes.
Good to
and
know.
It's very the William Lane Craig branch of a deeply philosophical apologetics.
So okay.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Cool.
And it's nice to sit there and ask a question every now and again that kind of stops the show. Not because it's disruptive, but you just see people just changes the tact very, very quickly. And apart from that, I've got a couple of people I speak to privately, having more long-term conversations. One of the things that I missed with going out and speaking to students is you have a 10-minute to a half an hour conversation, and it's very rewarding. But it's, at least from my side, I never found that people follow up, and I'm not there frequently enough to actually, hey, we spoke last time, how's it going? And I kind of wanted to try out this, if you have a longer interaction and kind of follow up and see where it heads, to see what happens there.
Yeah. I started online. It's so much easier for me to follow up with people. No, it's fine, actually. It's so much easier for me to follow up with people. I assume that you are a lot of what you're doing now is online, and it wasn't.
Yes, that's right.
I'm going to assume that South Africa is having a tough time with this, like everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm just going to generalize. um, so, how do you find that difference? I'm really interested in this. How SE works differently in person than like what we're doing, video to video.
Mm. Um, I think SE really benefits from body language.
Hmm.
And so why I said I'm sorry is I thought you might be talking about text, and I think text
No, no, it
and
doesn't
maybe
work
just
very well over text. I can do it over practice,
yeah,
but it is not easy at all.
no, it's really you miss so much of what makes it it's just so much harder really because
Hmm.
there's not enough context and it's easy that you get into a position where you're talking too much because you need to explain what you mean.
Hmm.
So no, I would really dislike text. I found the video, if you've got video, it works pretty well. There's
Hmm.
still sometimes it might be harder to get a pause because you don't have enough the body language that you can use to kind of mirror what your interlocutor is thinking and
Hmm.
touch of the chin and that type of stuff. It kind
Hmm.
of gets lost every now and again, but it's been working out well. The only problem I have is I would like to find somewhere where you can get people who are willing to talk. I've actually advertised in a local group,
Hmm.
but didn't get any bites.
Hmm. Hmm. I um I got to ride the coattails of Reed. He'd already set up a system to gather interlocutors, and I just got to go play on his. And the
Oh
stuff I've
wow.
done with Reed is the only stuff I've done live in person. Everything
Okay.
else I've been doing video to video, and I do a lot of it publicly. So it's just as public. You and I are just out in front of everybody, whether we're on a walking trail
Yeah.
or in our own living rooms. We're out there in front of you. Uh, so that part's not different. It's got all the same stage fright and self consciousness and wanting to be clear and all those things. Um, so yeah, I'm interested in how that works because I'm really looking forward to going and doing some. I'm trying to explore what it would take to do it with um, completely obvious safety. I'm even considering, so what if we both stay in our cars? We sit next to each other in a parking lot and we look at each other through the windows and we each have a tablet looking at each other, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out a way in which it can work. But
The,
then again, I'm not even certain if it's important. Anyway,
the one
I'm going
one
off
kind of
topic.
benefit that I've had
Hmm.
is it eases your nerves. For some reason, every time that I go out into public, I think it's maybe personality thing and putting yourself out there where you need to literally kind of flag down strangers and
Hmm.
get your foot in there. But it's every time I ask myself, what am I doing? Why am I doing this to myself? And
Hmm.
it takes, but you usually have one conversation just to take the edge off, and then it's fine.
Hmm.
I think I've once heard Anthony say that he experienced the same, and that made me feel better.
Indeed. I'm especially interested in the nuance around rapport in different regions. Even within my own country, I note a big difference between how Anthony or Ty's area, Tennessee or Texas versus here. It makes a lot of difference. Uh, Please speak to the how you see rapport differences from where you are to maybe other places. And this goes along with, have you ever lived in another place enough to know the difference?
No, I haven't ever lived in another place to know the difference, unfortunately. I can
Ah,
compare it to what I see on the US based channels. I don't think in South Africa we don't have a culture of really greeting strangers. So, and I think that actually it's beneficial to me because it already means that when I just greet somebody, I've got their attention. It's
mm-hmm,
not like just, hey, guy walks past type of situation. When you greet somebody, you've got their full attention, which I think actually makes it easier for me to initiate conversations.
mm,
Um, I think something which we're also kind of similar to the US, we're a bit of a multicultural pot.
mm-hmm,
So your the way you build rapport, the way you would initiate, start talking to people differs from what their cultural background might be.
Hmm.
Especially if you're talking to people who's more from my background, a more traditional, conservative Afrikaans speaking group,
Hmm.
you would take a different approach. Um, a, a thing something that I think makes a bigger difference than location is age. Um,
Mm.
I found that speaking to younger people is just so much easier than older people. I don't know if they're more suspicious or kind of what's this guy doing type of situation, but speaking to students, I found that to be much easier.
Okay. Next question. If a group of minors wanted to learn SE, is there any reason they shouldn't try and learn and practice street epistemology?
Mm. Um, I think there would definitely be a cutoff age where I would say, listen, somebody is too young to try and learn this. Because there is, you don't, if I teach somebody street epistemology, I don't want them to look at it as a script, as just this is what you do. Just ask why all the time, or something like that. And I think you need a certain level of maturity and understanding to be able to do that. But I think people in their teens typically they're perfect. It's a perfect way to introduce them to that. And I think it's a very powerful tool to teach critical thinking. I've got a friend who's a teacher, and she actually does that in her classroom, where she tries to teach epistemology by teaching people how to ask the right questions, and it's incredibly effective. It's just the how quickly kids look at this and realize, oh wow, this is amazing. I'm going to use this. It's super rewarding. So I would love to see street epistemology taught to people at a school level.
Uh, you might get your wish. Currently, there's a project going on the main SE Discord where we are gathering a team to do course development
Oh
directly to
wow,
that goal. And we are 4 meetings into 6 before we actually start assigning roles in the. If you have, it would be tough for you with the time zones, but if you like, join us over there. And all of you out there too, there's going to be there's stuff afoot. Are there contexts where SE with minors would be acceptable with the parents involved? Maybe.
Hmm. So I've actually had one conversation with a couple of 17 year olds. They were walking past me and they were talking about prayer, and I just couldn't help myself. And I don't know. I don't think I don't feel that was doing something wrong. I don't feel it was manipulative or anything like that. But I can understand that if their parents maybe listened in on the conversation, they might have been upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say if somebody is planning that, you should be very careful and get the parents involved, or at least explain to the parents what's happening, and then
Mm-hmm.
proceed from there. Because yeah, it's an issue of consent. If somebody is underage, their parents are responsible for what they're being exposed to, so you don't want to step on any toes.
Indeed. Yeah. Why don't we do SE with minors? It's almost like I'm
For
asking these questions in the wrong order, but that's okay.
the... That's good. Well,
We
it's
actually are picking them randomly from a list that we
oh really?
put together.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Although
it's,
there
it's,
there might be a little bit of, there's a question that goes together with, so they'll promote it.
okay.
Anyway, the production team's choosing them as we go. So
I
why don't
think
we do SE with minors?
I think it's exactly for that reason. Many parents I've even found in family settings where one family member would say something that another family member disagrees with in front of the kids, and that might cause friction. Um, Parents don't want to put themselves in a situation, well, I'm very generalizing here, but I can understand that for some parents, you don't want to be in a situation where your kids are being exposed to ideas that you don't want to agree with, and now you've got this extra baggage of having to explain yourself to your own child. Parents almost take it for granted that their kids will adopt their values and their beliefs, and whatever we might think about that type of approach, it seems to be a common one. So and it's if somebody takes that approach, it's their right. It's their child that they're raising, and we don't want to create friction there. So yeah, I think that's the main reason. It's to actually take that into consideration. Because if you maybe go and do have a conversation, and the parent finds out, and the parent gets mad at the child and get mad at you, it becomes a explosive situation, and you lose whatever benefit you would have had out of SE, because now you're turning it into a very negative experience.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Is there any claim that you would refuse to examine?
No. I've kind of thought about this. I think Eddie from Deep Discussions once spoke to a neo-Nazi, and that was, I was, okay, this is very, very brave and quite inspiring. But I think we shouldn't be afraid to examine those claims, because exactly those claims, that if you can get somebody to reconsider them, that's going to have the greatest impact.
Okay. Yep, she's working. Are you aware of some of the criticisms of street epistemology? Some see it as honest and manipulative. If so, do you think there's some merit in some of those points?
So as part of my my resident molehood at the Ratio Christi group, one night I gave them a presentation about street epistemology, and I kind of framed it as a way that this is actually a tool that you can use in evangelism. And I would love to see Christians use street epistemology. So as part of that, I had to go through all the criticisms and have a look and see what criticisms there are and address them, because obviously I knew I was going into an environment where people would know about street epistemology, and they would know some of these criticisms, and I would wanted to address them. So there's a couple, and to me it seems very circumstantial. A lot of the criticisms, especially from the Christian side, is not really aimed at street epistemology, but kind of aimed at a manual for creating atheists, the book that street epistemology was born from. So they're like definitions of faith and kind of the anti-religious language that went along with it. I think even Peter Boghossian said that it's kind of unfortunate. It was kind of a little bit of a marketing ploy during the height of new atheism. And his new book, I see, is he's completely changed his direction. So the criticisms, I think, are valid depending on the circumstances. But so a couple that I can mention. One would be that street epistemologists avoid discussing evidence. And the reason why we do that is not because we don't want to discuss evidence, but it's because we want to discuss the reasons people believe something. And if the evidence that somebody has doesn't influence their belief, why would you discuss that? It's kind of just a red herring.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Then there's issues about the scale that we use, that it's arbitrary, and there the scale isn't intended to be, oh, look at this, I've got this guy down to a 75%, I've helped him. It really just gives you.
We're not doing such tedious math as that.
Yeah.
We're not really doing arithmetic. The only thing is, are you in the same place or did you move?
That's yeah. And sometimes it's just like recalibrating the scale. Somebody might think they're at 100, And then they say, you haven't really changed my confidence, but now that we've had this conversation and understanding how I should proportion my confidence based on my beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm actually at 80%, but you
Mm-hmm.
didn't change anything. So
Okay.
that to me is also a win.
Sometimes that's the thing that they need to learn, is to get away from a binary belief, yes, no, down to something like some kind of proportionate. I don't care what the numbers are. There's 100 and 0, and there's not 100 and 0. And then there's something like 50-50. And all the other things are like, okay, fuzzy, fuzzy, fuzzy.
Yeah, it's
Uh, go
what
ahead.
what I've kind of seen of this is a lot of the street epistemology questions now or discussions that I watch become meta, especially Anthony in the discussions he does. It isn't so much about the claim
Mm-hmm.
as it is about epistemology itself. And to me, that's a very positive development. Even in the conversation that I have, where you've got the advantage of speaking to somebody over a longer period of time,
Mm-hmm.
you can tackle these topics and you see them learn to apply it in their own thinking. And that to
Mm-hmm.
me is just mind blowing.
Mm.
It's probably the best
I love
outcome
it.
you can have.
When would you abort out of an elite?
Um, when somebody isn't enjoying it is my
Oh,
main, yeah.
okay. So you want to see distinctly better than 0 rapport. You want to see positive enjoyment. So that's a good bar. Oh no. Brief. What are ways you identify patterns in the interviewee's perception in order to direct the conversation?
Mm. Um, I found that deep diving into the claim is a good way of getting more insight into exactly where the person is coming from.
Mm,
Um, when I started out, I was super stoked to get into okay the questions. We need to ask these why and how and what questions. And what I've found is if you actually go and spend more time on really understanding the claim, you get clues. Um, we even with one lady when we spoke about her belief in Christianity, I just by talking about it, um, I realized that she believes that everybody who believes in God believes in is a Christian. She didn't know that there are
mm,
other religions, so that became
mm.
a very interesting.
So she didn't know about Jews, which
No,
for
Jews.
for what her no, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Uh, Well, it's I mean
Mm,
it's the student might have grown up in a very small town,
mhm,
might have just been exposed to people who think exactly like her. So it was surprising, but I can understand where she's coming from, and that gave
mhm,
a very interesting kind of route to have the discussion around because now she's never even heard about somebody who doesn't believe the same as her. Now she needs to really deeply consider this. How can there be other people who also believe in God, but it's not her God? So it was an
mm.
interesting way to take the conversation. Another
Okay.
way is you kind of see patterns in when you have these conversations often enough. Um, like you might hear somebody use an apologetics term, or um, when you say something, you might see that somebody kind of uh, has a adverse reaction to pursuing some aspect of their belief,
Mhm,
and those can then those can be good goals. Um, where if somebody, for example, says you shouldn't question God, um,
mm,
you can then shift it rather than going pursuing the claim of okay, but why do you believe in God? You can talk about okay, but when are we justified to say we shouldn't test something? And what are the implications if you don't do that? I think if when you do that, rather than trying to just get this blocker out of the way, it's more productive.
Okay. How does SE allow people to find innate happiness without searching for it in relation to understanding inner contradiction?
Okay, that's an interesting question. How does SE allow people to find innate happiness? So how I understand this is for somebody who practices SE, or is it, how does it affect you as a practitioner? Why do people seem to enjoy doing street epistemology?
Okay.
So for me, it has definitely changed my way of thinking. I'm much more critical in my own beliefs and aware of my own biases, which has led me to form better beliefs, make better decisions, take more reliable actions. So that to me is very valuable. Something which is kind of separate to AC, to applying AC, but more also a part of what going out and talking to people is. It's really increased my empathy. It allows you, especially if you do AC where you go and talk to strangers, it forces you out of your comfort zone to speak to people who you might not normally speak to, and to gain an understanding and appreciation for your different views, which I really enjoyed, and it's been deeply rewarding for me.
If you could take medication that would render you emotionless for the duration of an SE conversation, and let's assume that the other side effects and everything else aren't like horrible, magically wonderful drugs, would you take that drug?
Is this like if you could get Reed Nice Wonder to share his stash? I wouldn't. I think I can see the benefits of it, especially if you tend to be very emotionally involved in these type of conversations, and you find that you struggle to control that. And I think that's something that some people struggle with. For me, I haven't had that issue much, and I find that being able to display empathy, having a bit of humor, just sympathizing with somebody, it really helps the conversation along. It helps you to build rapport, and I wouldn't want to lose that. I think for some people as well, what I've seen is, sorry, Reed, I'm not, don't mean to pick on you at all, but for some people that Reed speaks to, Reed has a very neutral approach, and he's amazing at it. So for some people, it seems to be not off-putting, but they don't seem to respond well to it. To them it seems as if somebody as if Reed is being insincere. Where for some other people, it just gives them this blank canvas where Reed is reflecting everything back to them without adding anything to it, and that's just amazing in what it can do for self-reflection. But I guess that the two approaches, being more neutral and at other times being more empathetic, is going to have different different levels of success depending on the personality of the person you're speaking to.
Okay. I'm looking for, there's a list, a Jonathan Haidt's virtues that he's talking about. It's a list of 6. If we could throw that up, we know where that is. And Ben, are you familiar with the ones I'm talking about? There's like a freedom, liberty, purity. I'm not remembering the whole list. We're going to try to grab it up there. Are you familiar with this? And what order would be your favorites, and which would be your least favorite? Do you? And I'll try to get the rest of the list up there before you have to think it all.
I've heard of it. I can't name them off of my head.
Okay.
So definitely, what's the
purity.
authority?
I know that's one of them.
Purity, and what's the
freedom,
opposite?
Liberty, care of the oppressed. 2 others that I'm I have to
Okay. I
pull
think
them off the
authority is
list.
in there as well.
Yes, respect for authority is one of those. And one other, I remember the list of 6. We'll figure that out. Anyway, of those 5, which are your favorites?
Freedom, liberty are to me the topmost 2. Then I would say empathy, care for the oppressed.
Okay.
Respect for authority is very, very, very low on my list, because I mean,
Okay.
you should be free to choose whether you want to do that. It shouldn't be something that is a value in itself. It should be something that you do to support other values.
Let's see if this. Okay.
Okay, there
Can't
we go.
quite see all of it. The very bottom one that you can't see is liberty and oppression. So care, harm, fairness, cheating, loyalty, betrayal, authority versus subversion, sanctity, degradation, and liberty and oppression. And you probably already answered it, but are there any of those that you think we should just toss like bullshit?
Yeah. Authority, I think I don't like the idea there. I understand why it's necessary, but it shouldn't be like I said, I don't think it should be a value in itself. It's kind of a tool that you would want to use. Loyalty to me is the same. It shouldn't be a value on its own. It should be support to your other values. So to me, care, liberty, and fairness are the ones that I would say these are actually values that are worth pursuing. Sanctity to me is also kind of just it's a byproduct. If you do value something and you act accordingly, sanctity or maintaining it will follow.
I see. So you see that as an emergent property, not something
Yeah.
or made its own end. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Nira, hopefully I asked the question that you wanted me to ask. I had to add a lot to it to make that make. Okay, and then I had 3 virtues. I thought I saw another, but I don't. Okay, let's pull one from. What actions must the interrogator perform to qualify a content as being street epistemology, according to your personal standard of what street epistemology means, not what you think somebody else thinks?
This is a very hard question, and I think sometimes it can be kind of a controversial question in the street epistemology community. I've actually seen people have disagreements about this.
Oh no, disagreements. What shall we do?
Agreement is terrible. Yeah. To me, yes, I would say where you try and get the person to reflect on what they believe. You might have different methods. You might not be asking questions. You might literally be having a conversation about epistemology itself, where it's a back and forth and not investigating a claim. That to me would still be street epistemology, where you're motivating somebody to think about their epistemology, which in my mind qualifies something as street epistemology.
Okay, I like that. If you could read minds, would you? Would you take that option if you were capable of it?
I would love that. I think it would just make doing street epistemology easier. And it sounds terrible. It sounds really immoral to want to do that. But I think when we
you wouldn't have to be the only person who could. If everybody could to an equal degree, it would just be another path of language.
And I mean, how different would society be? Because language is so fallible. It really, I think there's this one model where they say, okay, no, whenever you try and communicate something, there's like 5 points of failure. First, you need to really conceptualize what you're trying to communicate, and that can fail. Then you need to verbalize what you want to communicate, and that can fail. Then the person that you're communicating to needs to receive what you're getting, and that can fail. They need to interpret it, that can fail. And finally, they need to build their own mental model of what their interpretation is of what you try to communicate, and that can fail. So
I might
almost,
steal that list. That was a really well put list.
I was
Note to
making
self:
notes of
write
it.
that list down, Dolly. Thank you.
And
Go ahead.
so if you consider that, it's amazing that we communicate effectively at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we were able to really just look into each other's minds and understand what somebody is saying, it would get rid of a lot of the problems that we're dealing with. A lot of the assumptions we make in every conversation that we have. So to me, that would be great. But I can also see why that would cause issues, obviously.
Mm-hmm. 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 Thank you. What do you do if your interlocutor says no to the tic-tac test? Either it's not necessarily odd or even, or maybe they wouldn't be willing to say that the third person who disagrees, one of us is wrong, that kind of
I haven't really had many cases of this, but I think a
thing.
good approach is to up the stakes. It's
Mm-hmm.
easy to say, okay, no, for the tic tac test, it's can be either, but okay, can you hand me your phone quickly? Is this
Mm.
my phone now? Why
Mm.
isn't it?
Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. I saw
Um,
Anthony do that with a water bottle. I doing that with their phone. That seems very cheeky.
it's I think to say no to that test is a defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's you also see it, especially when you talk to more apologetic types. They might just choose not to engage on a question, and there you want to frame it because it's a lot of these things. It's impossible to hold that view and live a normal life if you're really believe that it's okay to believe false things. Um, People can know about circumstances where they just wouldn't accept that. If somebody just was 100% convinced that they can walk into traffic and nothing will happen to them, is that okay? So it's good to use those examples. It's actually one of the criticisms I received is that street epistemology uses shameful examples, and
Shameful. You
my
mean like what about
shameful.
the examples are shameful?
So it's like where if you do an outsider test for faith and you,
Mm-hmm.
for example, um, reference somebody who just believes because they were raised that way or something like that, that would be a shameful example of what
Mm.
it would be. And it's and what I try to explain is that the intention is not to to find some example that's shameful and say this is what applies to you. The
Mm-hmm.
intention is to find common ground.
Mm.
If we can both say that, listen, this person, whether it's hypothetical or not, would be in the wrong, or there would be some problem with the way that they're viewing things, that gives us at least some common ground that we can now work up to where you might be at. It might not be the same thing, but
Mm-hmm.
it might be a line somewhere that we're trying to find. And if we don't have that common ground first, we might just go around in circles in the discussion
Mm-hmm.
that we have.
Mm. Yeah. When we've had this one. Abort question says yes, it's abort question. We will do it again. What biases do you intentionally hold, if any, while asking questions in the Olympus? What biases do you maybe unintentionally hold?
Intentionally biases. I don't think I intentionally hold any biases. Um, I try in the linkers to be open to finding out that I'm wrong. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I intentionally try and suppress my background info, my background beliefs when I
Mm-hmm.
have a conversation. So that I try and intentionally really push back all of the biases that I have. I try to control for them because they can cause a serious they can be a blocker to the conversation that you're trying to have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what biases would be beneficial if you hold them in a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if you're trying to set an example for somebody,
Mm-hmm.
you you could not role play, but you can use it as a demonstration, especially if you're going to, okay, but um, if we take this belief that you have and we the way that you might be holding it, you see a bias there, you can kind of reflect that bias and say, okay, but if we apply the same standard, what would happen if we looked at a different belief, something that you disagree with?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think overall, um, if we think about street epistemology as you want to express the behavior that you want your interlocutor to have, uh, to,
Mm-hmm.
to to mirror, it's a good idea to try and avoid bias as much as possible.
Uh, okay. So Near asks, do you see things like a reverence to evidence or a commitment to truth as a kind of bias?
That's a good question. Um, a bias. So I would say a bias is a shortcut that you have in thinking. Um,
Mm.
so to me, I wouldn't see those as biases. I would see them as values that you hold. Your your
Okay.
values can have a they definitely has a bias on you, or that affects
Yes.
it biases you because it's something that I've looked at these things. These are the things that I think are the things that are worth pursuing. So obviously, I'm not neutral anymore. I've got
Mm-hmm.
some, but I wouldn't see them as something in the line of what do you call it? Uh, Man, when you see something and it already fits your worldview and you accept it
Yep.
more, yeah,
Cognitive, conformational bias,
confirmation bias. That's it.
which is
So
either conformational or confirmational, but whichever, it means the same thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So to me, even though I value truth and I've got a bunch of beliefs that and values that I'm committed to, I've
Mm-hmm.
actually, like for confirmation bias as example, when I find something which to me, some fact which to me seems exceptional and it
Mm-hmm.
supports my position, I'm extra skeptical of it. I'll actually go and hold it to a higher standard because I'm afraid that my other commitments might make me more susceptible to just accepting it and actually being mistaken about it.
Okay. I think you may have answered the second half of the first question was what biases do you unintentionally hold? And you may have answered that. Do you want to speak more to biases that you are, well, there could be unaware, but I couldn't ask you about that. Maybe those that you would like to get rid of, but
Um,
haven't?
sometimes I think like your background knowledge about a belief biases the way in which you ask your questions and the way
Mm-hmm.
that you send your conversation in. And I'm in two minds about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you are really a blank slate, you can sometimes ask questions that are just so hard hitting to somebody who's used to speaking to people who believe exactly what they believe. Just
Mm-hmm.
by like if for example you're speaking to somebody who who's a Christian and
Mm-hmm.
they say something about the Holy Spirit and you ask them, Holy Spirit, what is that? To somebody who's grew up in a Christian home and might have been an ex-Christian, it doesn't really
Mm-hmm.
occur to ask that type of question. But to somebody who's never heard about Christianity, somebody talking about the Holy Spirit, this is something weird. I've never heard about this. Tell me more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that can be beneficial. But on the other side, if you have some knowledge about the claim and maybe the pitfalls that you have, you can use your questions to elucidate some of that. um, which can also be beneficial. So it's a I don't know which one is best. I'm still experimenting.
What lesson in doing street epistemology was the hardest for you to learn? And what do you think is the hardest for the general population?
I think it's definitely shutting up and letting the other person speak. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's really difficult, and even when you know it, it's so easy to not follow that advice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you need to know not to preach, not to just be delivering your own message, and you need to know when just to stay quiet and let somebody revel in their own thinking. You know, those
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
spider of the ceiling moments. I've and the conversations that I have with one of my friends that I'm having on like a bi-weekly basis, where we talk about epistemology. I've really seen that whenever we talk about some topic that gives me off on a tangent, at the end of it, when I'm doing like 80% of the talking, I come out of the conversation feeling I really messed up. Even though I might have stated my case perfectly and beautifully, you can see the reaction just isn't the same as when you say something which engages the person. You ask a question that prompts reflection, and I think the biggest obstacle to doing that is flapping your jaw too much.
Indeed. Do you have a minimum goal or a passing grade in Olympus? How often do you fail to achieve that minimum?
Mm. So I think a minimum goal should be if you ask the person whether they'd want to continue the conversation that they say yes. Uh, that would be my minimum goal. Um, I think I failed it once or twice, where it really wasn't a positive interaction, and I don't think the person would have wanted to speak with me again.
Good. And I think if you can get 80% of your conversations to work out well, that's a pretty passing grade.
Mm.
Yeah, I like that one. Let's see. It is up here. What results of an Olympus are the most rewarding or the best grade, the highest satisfaction? And how often do you achieve that high mark? So this is the other side, not the minimum, but what's the best?
So this is my answer would be when your interlocutor makes a statement, stops themselves, and then asks themselves a question that you would ask.
Ah,
To,
okay.
to me, that is just okay. My job here is done. I'll just sit
Mm-hmm.
back and watch you do it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's something which I only experienced very recently. Having more long form conversations, I think it's you won't get that in a little 30-minute interview.
Mm.
I've also seen on Anthony's latest videos where he's been handing out the puzzle pieces and getting people to
Mm-hmm.
come speak with him more frequently, that you see that happening, and to me that's just amazing. I think that is my goal with street epistemology. It's not to change somebody's mind. It's not to convince someone that they're wrong. It's to teach somebody to this way of thinking of really taking your responsibility of taking your beliefs and making sure that you're doing your best to make them as accurate as possible. You're not giving in and just loading on things that suit you. If I think if we can do that, we're doing the right thing.
Thank you. Um, Near asks, what are your favorite bands or artists?
Ooh, um, it's changed a lot, but currently I would say Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. It's just amazing, amazing music.
Okay. I'll make a note to add a link in the doobly doo to Nick Cave and the Cave. Give me the name again.
Nick Cave
I'm
and
not
the
familiar.
Bad. Not
Nick
familiar.
Cave and the Bad Seeds. No, I'm
They've
not familiar.
been around decades. It's
I'll
one of
check it out.
when
Yes.
people
And
ask me if I could get rid of a religion, if I could press a button and get rid of a religion, would I do it? Like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds is one of the reasons why I would say no. He's just one of those people who uses this, biblical imagery, this mythology that we all share in such an effective way in his music that you wouldn't be able to get that same poetry out of it if people didn't share this common understanding of those stories and ideas.
oh wow. Okay, I will definitely be checking them out. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And then it's becoming a tradition. What's your favorite color?
I'm going to disappoint again and say I don't have a favorite color. But
That's
if
okay. Thank you.
the color you'd find in my closet most often is probably green.
Interesting. Good. Oh, well, apparently we've asked this question before, but it is a standard question often asked from our crowd.
Not to be dodged.
Okay. What is your quest? Okay. What is the worst result you have seen in an Olympus? In one of yours?
Experience personally, okay. I've damaged a relationship, where this is when I just started out. Somebody close to me believed something which I saw as really harmful, really likely to have serious impacts on their life. And in the Olympus, I pressed harder than I should have, to the point where it was an extremely negative experience for her. And I think that can easily even trigger the backfire effect, where you make this person more confident, or at the very least less open to having a discussion about the belief in the future, which is a terrible outcome in my mind. I've had other reactions which I wouldn't say it was an interesting result, where I spoke to somebody who had a belief that they had because their grandmother taught them to have the belief, and we went through talking about, okay, well, is believing something because your relatives or your grandparents believe it a good pathway to truth. And we took the outside test for faith, and it was going very well. And then afterwards, when I asked him, okay, so has your confidence in this belief changed? He said, yes, it's gone up to 100%. So that was okay. That's very interesting. And there I kind of just lost it. I was like irritated with him. I was just taken aback. I'm like, oh, I thought this was going well.
Okay, there are a few silly questions about what is your quest and what is the weight of a laden African swallow. I think these are Monty Python references. So I'm not going to go with that. We are almost approaching more. Next question. Is water wet? Oh, no. Yes, apparently water varies in its wetness. I bet by temperature. Something about hydrogen bonds. Do you have a favorite category of claim? Are there claims you fear or dread in front?
I really enjoy religious claims. Religion just interests me. I know it's kind of a apologist's dream to hear a street epistemologist say that. Interesting. What
you mean? Dream or nightmare? I mean,
dream?
You mean that in a positive or sense?
Epistemologists, they're having these conversations about karma, but it's just to fool everybody. These street epistemologists are really just out to lead the children to Satan. No, it's
well, if that's what critical thinking leads to, so be it.
No, I really. So I think what I found is that religion colors, if for religious people, their religion tends to color a lot of their beliefs, even their political leanings, their even their position about something like climate change or whether you should wear a mask in a pandemic can be affected by their religious beliefs. So maybe it's a bit of a shortcut, but I think it's a very valuable claim to explore with somebody, even if it just is to make them think more deeply about it. On the religious claim, I always say that if I talk to somebody about a religion and I reduce their confidence that the religion is true, that's great. If I convince that person to deep dive into apologetics and find these amazing reasons for believing what they believe, that's good to me as well. If I can get
Okay.
somebody to engage with their claims. Claims that I fear or dread to confront. I don't like talking about claims about values, what
Mm.
values somebody should have, because to me it's not really something which lends itself well to street epistemology. They become very fuzzy.
Hmm. Okay. What is the most ridiculous or outlandish claim you've come across while doing street?
I interviewed a guy who believes that all folklore has some foundation in reality. So
Mm.
witches,
There's a little
vampires,
truth in everything. Is that kind of the way they'd say that?
all of those things. It's like
Okay.
it must be a you must really enjoy the world. It must be a magical place where anything is possible. What I find
Hmm.
interesting about that conversation is it was I kind of got the sense that he was willing to grant anything because he didn't want to go into or he didn't want to question some of these things that he believed in. So
Hmm.
he saw that if and it makes it difficult to apply the outsider test to the claim then, because if you say okay, but so you believe in vampires, but some because of some cultural traditions. But if there's a culture that has a tradition of a unicorn, would you also believe that? And he would say yes. So
Hmm.
it, it becomes a shield that, at least from that perspective, makes it difficult for him to challenge those claims and think about them.
Okay. Um, I bet we have a bunch more questions. I've kept you almost an hour. Do you want to go longer?
Oh, I'll be happy to go
Sure.
longer.
Okay. How often do you modify your own confidence claim during or after an Linkus? And have you
Mhm.
ever had a greater than 50% confidence shift in yourself during from something that happened in SE?
I think the approach that I take to try and be as open to changing my mind in a conversation does make me modify my confidence quite frequently. Um, it's not massive steps, but I often find myself wondering about, at least after the conversation, about the reasons that somebody gave for believing what they believe, especially when people talk about personal experiences. Um, I've never had a shift greater than 50%, because I've never really had conversations about ideas that I think to have a shift like that, it would have to be a topic where you don't, you haven't really looked into it that much, because that's a serious shift. There would have to be of either
Hmm.
some amazing evidence that you've never heard of and never encountered before, or it has to be something where you're speaking to someone about something that you don't know that well, and they're much more knowledgeable than you are, that they can actually shift you.
Hmm.
Um, I've, I think in some of my political beliefs, it might be likely that I could experience something like that, but it's political
Hmm.
conversations or political AC interactions. I haven't had that many of them.
Hmm. Hmm. You've gotten me thinking about the question of examining values claims, and that is a category that I'm willing to engage in. And I'm wondering how useful that is. I've got to review that.
I think
Thanks. You got me thinking.
I definitely think it's valuable. I just think it's
Mm-hmm.
difficult. It's not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Does your experience in SE change your communication style outside of SE? And if so, is this uniformly good, uniformly bad, or a mixed bag?
Hmm. Um. It definitely has. Uh, my boss always says I'm the guy who always questions everything. Um, I think that's kind of one of the results of SE, that I don't. I'm not afraid of challenging ideas, or not challenging, but asking questions to dig into something and really understand it. Um, Personally, I think that it's been mostly good, the changes that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the only the biggest negative part of it that I've had is in conversations with my wife, where
Mm.
she feels I'm gaming the system if I use more Socratic questions. But
Mm.
she's also picked up on it and asked me those types of questions. So having the tables turned has made it that she's more receptive to having those types of
Mm.
conversations, which is very
Oh,
cool.
I'm glad of that. I'm glad of that. Uh, I invite anybody in the room, if you'd like to unmute, you can throw your own questions at Ben. Is shifting position on the spot possible if you didn't fact check the argument yet? Could you change
Personally,
your mind before you check and confirm or deny or test?
hmm. So shifting a position would to me be a very large change in confidence. So my personal epistemology, depending on what the type of claim we're talking about, if it's something based in reality, um, it's very unlikely that I would shift my perspective just because of somebody's testimony, for example. If it's something which is so major that I would um, I would shift my position on it, I would want to fact check it, unless I'm talking to somebody who I know is much more knowledgeable and reliable on the topic. Um, and applying it to somebody else, that question, I would say that would depend on their epistemology. If somebody has a epistemology where they value evidence, and um, that I would think they would be have the same answer as I do. But if it's not, then I can imagine you can, if you have some other way that you establish something or establish what you believe, it's possible that somebody might shift their position easily without fact checking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I think I've had a few where I knew the underlying information that they talked about, but I hadn't considered it in that way. And it was sort of like me being willing to take in a few definitions and then agree that those led to a conclusion that I didn't have much of an opinion about before, but I concurred that it was an obvious conclusion. So there are a few cases where I've had my confidence shifted some significant mark without having anything to look up.
Would that be would that also involve a change in your understanding of the claim itself? So
Yes.
like, if we're talking about definitions, it's like you understand
Yeah.
what they were actually trying to claim. Yeah.
Yeah. This specifically was in a Linkus with a psychology student, and they effectively taught me a thing that I understood the basics of and I hadn't put together.
Okay, that's awesome. I think there I would that makes sense to me. If I have had experiences where somebody would make a claim which to me would just seem outlandish, and when you actually dig into it and they explain their terms and explain where they're coming from, okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it wouldn't necessarily be some massive new information coming into what my belief system. It would be just be like, okay, this claim has now been calibrated, and if me now understanding it correctly, it's something that I
Mm-hmm.
agree with.
Yes, indeed. Do you ever get called out as being Mr. Negative at work for asking?
Ooh. Um. No, it's the usually it's the response is positive. I should actually think of it. It's a good question.
Well,
Uh,
I'll interject here because I get called out for that a lot.
okay. So
Primarily because from the marketing department, because I find they don't do enough research, because we've had a lot of products that have just fallen on their face and we've spent a lot of money on them.
wow. I can imagine. So I work in programming, software development in an engineering field. So asking questions is really helps. It's a technical situation. You need to make sure you dot your I's, cross your T's, and if somebody just makes assumptions and those go through, it can have dire consequences down the line. So I think I'm privileged where people actually appreciate and have an understanding of doing that due diligence, really looking looking at this thing properly has advantages. But I can also see, I mean, for many people, they would kind of see you as just like you said, the marketing department. They just want to get stuff out of the door, and you asking these questions is just slowing things down. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And the thing is, because I do engineering as well, but I find they don't like the fact they don't like to. From my perspective, marketing should take a very similar approach as engineering.
mm,
Because I think all the successful companies that market do their due diligence and do their research, and don't
yeah,
just like make a pile of assumptions, which tends to be the marketing department that I have to deal with.
yeah. Do you want to be the used car salesman, or do you want to be the guy who's built this thing himself and understands the ins and outs and really believes in his product?
Right. Well, years ago when I was in a different field, I was drug along as marketing, I guess, to trade shows, and I tend to not want to go to them because I inherently like machines more than people. So I ended up going, and it was only a couple of days, so it wasn't a big deal. But the head of marketing for that company was just shocked that I had no trouble getting people to gather around while I demonstrated stuff because I knew the product so well. And I says, yeah, but don't think I want to do this full time. This job to me is easy, but I would prefer to do something more complex. That's sort of how I answered that one. But um, those people, I mean, currently the company I work with, I haven't been anywhere where I can demonstrate my marketing skills. So, but I guess talking to them, I should be able to demonstrate my marketing skills, which is why I'm here, right?
Yeah, you can practice.
Hmm. A lot of the reason I'm here is to improve my communication skills. That's one of my compound goals. This thing's all built around.
Mm.
Plus, I have my own ideas I want to market as well. So,
Oh, cool. Tell me about them later in DM.
for the company,
want.
right? Not
Oh, well, then
necessarily.
just tell
Yeah,
them then.
yeah,
don't want
that's
to talk.
right. That's what I meant. It's like I got a little.
Indeed.
I'm somewhat successful and becoming more and more successful. So, and this
I'm glad.
probably has helped.
That's very good. Have you made any lasting friendships that started as a conversation?
One at the moment. Uh, Somebody who I'm talking to frequently at the moment. Hopefully, we'll be meeting in person soon. The pandemic just slowing down on this side at least. But the SE really changed my social circles a lot. It got me involved with my local secular society. That led me to attending a apologetics conference. To go and do some SE there, where I met the Rashu Christie people who I've also befriended. So it really has had a major impact on my social life.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad to hear. Have you observed anyone trying to do street epistemology where they failing badly enough that they could not finish the interview, where they actually had to abort out because they just failed on it?
Not that badly. My wife has tried SE on some of her family members,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really, it's so difficult. Not difficult, but it's, you see her. Well, she doesn't do it as often as I do, and she's getting to grips with it. And one of the things, she still needs to learn that patience. He still needs to know, okay, I've asked this question. This person is thinking about it, so shh. So when I'm sitting there next to her, it's like, you need to hold on to something and just keep your mouth as shut as possible because you don't want to interrupt it. But yeah, it's interesting to watch when you're not the person in the driving seat.
Yes, Threek says, I still can't imagine SE merged with apologetics while still being SE. I agree. I think apologetics couldn't do proper interrogation, couldn't possibly be neutral enough.
Well, so I, for example, had a conversation with two friends where the one lady I spoke to was a Christian, and after the conversation, she said, "Oh no, you need to speak to my friend. She's just like you." I said, "Okay, what do you mean?" "No, she also doesn't believe." So she pulled her friend over, and we had a conversation about her, why she doesn't believe in Christianity, and she was actually doxastically closed about her belief that there are no gods, which to me was interesting.
She's that mythical atheist I've almost never met.
And one of the reasons she gave was surprising, that she felt that she had so much pressure put on her by believers, and that they were unmovable in their positions, that to her it was just a natural reaction for her to be unmovable in her position as well. And we kind of shifted the conversation to, okay, but if all of us take that position, right, how is anybody ever going to change their mind? Should we really use the lowest common denominator to inform how we approach our beliefs? So that was an interesting conversation.
Yeah. I think doxastically closed atheists are right in. They're the people I want to target with SE.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
it's a bad place. That's a hobgoblin that the theists put up. It's not really representative of where atheism is coming from. So I want to change their.
No,
Reset
I
my
think,
video.
I think it's
I will
fair.
reset.
I haven't had too many. Well, I've actually met a couple of atheists to take that position, and that's why I really think. I mean, if I can get apologists to do that work for me, that's great. I mean, just because you get somebody to talk to an atheist or about their epistemology and maybe change aspects of their epistemology doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to accept Christianity. And if they, or some other religion, and if they accept religion, that's fine. That's part of the process they need to go through in informing what they believe. I really don't see that SE should be something that apologists shouldn't use. I do agree that it's completely contrary to the normal apologetics shtick, and it's probably going to be hard for an apologist to get used to that. Because what I've found is usually when they do questions, they ask like these big ticket, where do you think we come from, or what happens after we die? And I think that's going to be this nice little garden trail you can lead your interlocutor down. But I think street epistemology is going to be much more effective. I've actually, the guy that I'm talking to at the moment, the Christian who I've befriended, one of the things we've spoken about is how negatively he's experienced his conversations with his atheist friends. And what I've been trying what I'm trying to convince him is to actually use street epistemology, to use the same questions that we discuss and discuss that with them rather than, uh, you know, having a different, more confrontational approach.
Good. Three-part question. Hypothetically, what could you learn that would increase your confidence that your practice of SE is good for society? And then we'll ask for your interlocutors and then yourself.
I would love to see a study done on street epistemology to see how effective it is compared to other means of persuasion. So I think SE is only as, you know, SE, if it's used for the purpose of improving people's epistemologies, I think it's universally good. So, but my question would be more around effectiveness. It's only good if it actually works. So if I could see something that convinced me that SE is more effective than I think it is, that would definitely increase my confidence.
Okay. And then how about good for your interlocutors?
Oof.
What hypothetical could you learn that would increase your confidence that SE is good for your interlocutor?
I think something that would definitely change my mind is if I don't know, we were having I'm convinced philosophically at least that having a sound epistemology is universally beneficial. But I don't. There might be it might be that for whatever reason, if somebody has a good epistemology, they might be less happy because they're too realistic or pessimistic potentially, or nihilistic, something like that. Something which was an interesting idea, which I spoke about to someone about skepticism, and I think SE and skepticism kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Is that they've found that they feel very moderate, like they're able to see both sides of a situation. They still would pick a side, but their respect for the other side would make them less emotionally charged to take action. It's you don't have that conviction of a somebody who's a true believer who thinks, okay, I need to go on this march because I believe in this cause, and that might be there might be some merit to actually having some true believers, because those might be the people who change a society. But I'm open to the jury is still out on that.
I'm familiar with that idea about the all progress is made by unreasonable people, because usually you have to be completely stubborn in order to put the effort in to make it much easier for other people later. So I'm familiar, and I rather like that idea. So it's good that some of us are unreasonable. So the last part, what could you learn that would make you think SE is even better for yourself than you think so now? We didn't actually ask your confidence on this, so these are blind hypotheticals.
Yeah. It's hard because what I've often thought is it would have been great if I had a journal. If I was somebody who could journal, and I could see, like, go to my journal and look at how did I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and how has that changed? And it would be difficult, I think, to correlate that to say, okay, this is all because of SE. But yeah, I think if I had something like that, and or maybe sometime in the future, I find something that I wrote or some interaction that I had, and I can see, okay, this is not something that I would do now, and most probably it's because of SE. That would increase my confidence. This is something that has been good for me.
Okay, thank you. I'm Kimberly, next question, please. Ah. Oh, it's the same question reversed.
Reversed.
Yes. Hypothetical decreasers.
Okay, so I've spoken about the one decrease that I can think of would be if we could have some evidence that points out that you don't want everybody in your society to have these absolutely solid, can see both sides of the equation type of epistemologies. I'm not entirely convinced that we need to try and press for that. Good for my interlocutors. I think to say overall, I would have to observe patterns in what happens when people change their epistemologies. So if I have some evidence that shows when people actually abandon or change their epistemologies, their belief systems, that there's some negative effect tied to that would change my confidence necessarily. But so far, my experience is that it's almost always, there are side effects, obviously. People leave some in group that they're part of. There might be serious consequences for them. Yeah. So
losing religion can be very disruptive to your social life if your social life is amongst the highly religious that will throw you out. And that could be not, or even a theistic religion. It could be a political party. It could be a whole bunch of things. Yeah.
Yeah. No. You can see it can literally be something like whether your beliefs around coronavirus. I've seen conversations where people literally don't, on either sides, where if you're not going to wear a mask, unfriend me now. I don't want to speak to you. Or if you're a sheeple and you wear your mask and you're hiding inside your house, unfriend me now. I don't want to speak with you. I don't want to know you anymore. So I don't think it's a very human thing, and it's not just tied to religion. For myself,
I'm blown away that mask wearing has become a politically divisive thing. That just blows my freaking mind. Oh.
No, it's just...
Okay, so I actually have two questions here. Let's see. The first is it important to go into street epistemology understanding that your mind might be changed by someone's good reasons for their belief?
Yes, I think it is. I think that the benefit, if you do street epistemology, but you don't model the behavior you expect from your interlocutor, you're missing half of the point. It is, especially now in the long form conversations I have, I see it. I literally see my friend picking up the way that I interact with him, incorporating it into the way he thinks and behaves, and that's what you want to do. So it's invaluable to have that attitude.
Have you experienced an interlocutor having a perverse response to an alincus, like dramatically increasing their confidence in an obviously daft or unmotivated claim?
Yes. So one would be the guy who, after the outsider test for faith about believing things that your grandma taught you, increased his confidence. One was a conversation I had with a girl where we went, I think the conversation was the first time that she really investigated or thought about the reasons that she had for her belief. So she initially gave a 60-70% confidence level. And after the conversation, we didn't really delve into the reliability of the methods that she uses as much. It was quite a short conversation, but just having that experience where she had to kind of go and list the reasons that she had for her belief boosted her confidence.
Thank you. Please tell me about your YouTube channel. When did you start? What kind of things are up there?
Okay. I started my channel in at the beginning of 2018. So my approach is very similar to Anthony Magnabosco's approach. I've got my GoPro mounted on my chest. Feel super self-conscious walking out of it and my little whiteboard. I primarily go out to a local university where I have discussions with students there. The videos that I put up are kind of a mixed bag. I want to demonstrate conversations that I think go well, but also conversations that don't go so well. So I tend to put both of those on. The idea there being I would love for people to learn from my mistakes just as much as I would love for them to learn from my successes. My biggest issue on my YouTube channel, and one of the things that maybe made me post less and less and go on a hiatus, is just the fact that I have to do it. I can't go onto campus. There's security concerns that they have that are a bit unreasonable, but so I'm actually standing out in the streets on the sidewalk talking to people, which means there's garbage trucks and we've got these little minibus taxis, and the way that they this way of communicating where it's just honking constantly, and we've got special wildlife issues, these birds that are just the noisiest things that you can imagine. And it's a nightmare trying to edit all of that out to get the audio to a level where it's usable. So that's been one of the things I've struggled with the most on the channel. So most of my conversations I try to keep them under 20 minutes. I try to keep them lighthearted and positive. And I've also had a couple of experiments. I think, like I don't know who, but who've developed all of these ideas, like the tic-tac-toe test or the Ferrari test. I don't know if it comes from a manual for creating atheists or where it came from, but I think they're super valuable. They give us these little tools that we have in our toolbox in our conversations that you don't have to go and figure out on your own. And what I wanted to do is to try and add to that body of tools that we have. So that means experimenting with new thought experiments. The one where we had a discussion on the Street Epistemology Facebook group where somebody asked, why don't we disclose our position before a conversation? It's kind of a spoken idea that we say, well, that's going to already put a different spin or a different perspective on your interlocutor and might cause them to be more closed. But do we know that? Is there maybe a benefit that we can have to that? So I've got a video up where I've asked my interlocutor, would you like to know what my position is on your claim before we start? And it completely changed the conversation because I explain exactly what I'm doing. I explain why we're on different sides of things, and I asked her, well, when I ask you these questions, feel free to ask them back to me, or feel free to ask me why I'm asking you these questions, and I'll explain to you, which turned it into more of a learning situation. And,
can I toss in a side before we change?
Please.
Sure. Your audio problems, Anthony uses a guy in Germany. I'm not saying that you would necessarily use him, but you might want to ask Anthony who he uses and see if you can maybe get some tips from him or something to clean up his audio. He apparently sends all his audio over to this guy. So maybe the guy has some pointers for you or something.
I think I should just use the guy. If I ever get started again, I think I'm just going to use the guy.
Yeah, I think he's just volunteered, but it's just a suggestion. Right?
No, I'll say whatever he asks.
Yeah, there you go. Because it sounds like you have a little bit of audio issues that you could use help with.
I understand Anthony does pay him.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it saves him a lot of work, right? So.
Sure.
It's a big job dealing with audio.
It's huge, yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
And the last thing on my my channel that is the questionnaire that I did, which I'm thrilled
I love that questionnaire.
Oh,
We have another
you.
interview with almost entirely about the questionnaire, but please let us know, because
Yeah.
there might be some people only get this this feed.
So what anybody probably will pick up when we talk about SE in it, we kind of touch on it early in the interview, are these patterns, related beliefs, related ways of related ideas in epistemology. You would find somebody who's maybe a relativist, or you would find somebody who has a high value for closure. Closure being they don't like uncertainty, especially on big questions. Well, why am I here? What's the meaning of life? And as a street epistemologist, it takes a lot of effort to dig to identify those. You might have a long conversation, and at the very end, somebody might say something which then triggers you to think, okay, um, this person has this idea or this emotional attachment to their belief, something like that. So what I wanted to do with the questionnaire is to kind of create something which touches on statements that relate to those types of ideas and beliefs and approaches. To kind of give you a way of finding, if you go through this questionnaire, finding a topic which then you think, okay, this is a good thing for me to discuss with somebody. And an unintended consequence or side effect that I found when I actually went through the questionnaire is just how much reflection the questionnaire itself can invoke when you ask somebody these questions. Specifically, when you actually you yourself are reading the questions to somebody and asking them what they would say. If you just stick it down on the table, people grab a pen and they tick 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 most of the time, and it's done in a couple of minutes. But every time that I actually ask a person the questions, it turns into maybe an hour or half an hour to hour and a half discussion about, okay, but what? Let me really think about this. It triggers reflection that you usually would only see in a SE conversation itself. So yeah, I'm very proud, and especially about old Nathan, abstract activist SE, the way that he's been using it. I'm thrilled. Another interesting application that I heard about is Rob Swanson. I think I think he's a college teacher, and he teaches astronomy. And one of his peeves was many of his students would come in and they would believe that the moon landing was fake. Apparently, that's
in astronomy class.
Astronomy class, or they would believe that the universe is 6,000 years old or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he actually he gives the students the questionnaire to fill in when the very first day they walk into the class.
Mm-hmm.
He keeps the questionnaires, and then he asks them to fill it in again at the end of their class. And he uses it as a way, has he been effective in teaching them or giving them better tools to evaluate what they believe.
Well, and he's using specifically the SE questionnaire about truth as opposed to something else. Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Could SE be co-opted by bad actors for nefarious purposes? And what would someone have to change about SE to make it nefarious? I have a thing in mind, but I'm not going to spill my beans yet.
Definitely. SE is a means of communication, an unpopular opinion. Communication is by its nature manipulative. When you communicate something, you usually want to give somebody information, or you want to change their mind about something. You want to convince them that something is the case.
Yeah.
Or not the case. So I think definitely it's, especially if you take a very scripted approach to SE, which to me
Mhm.
is a more, it's fine when you're learning it, but it's kind of shallow. You need to, as you do apply SE, and also apply it to your own thinking, you
Mhm.
realize that that's maybe some approaches, some questions um, aren't as fair as you initially thought they were.
Mhm.
Like for example, the question, could you be wrong about that? It's one of my pet
Mhm.
peeve questions. It really annoys
Mhm.
me. It kind of reminds me of something that Daft Dawkins would say.
Yeah.
Um,
Could you be
yeah,
wrong about that? Is a PV question? You don't like that one?
yeah. It's to me, it's something where the only reason why I think that question would be a good question to ask is to
Mhm.
see whether somebody holds a fallibilist position, whether they know
Mhm.
that they could be mistaken about something.
Yes.
To it, and I think it would be the exception to the rule that somebody would say no to that question. That no, I cannot be wrong about this. And
Mm.
especially if you're talking to somebody who's kind of got a bit of a background in skepticism or philosophy,
Mm.
I think asking somebody that question, it's like, really, yes, I can be wrong about everything that I believe, but
Yep.
so what? So I think those questions can be abused,
Mhm.
and yeah, I don't think SE can easily be turned to something like a brainwashing tool or something like that. So um, to make it nefarious, what would you have to add or remove from it? I think what you would have to add to it would be using the vulnerability that
Mm.
SE sometimes can induce when somebody realizes that they aren't as on solid ground as they think they are, or they've identified something which shakes them.
Mhm.
Abusing that vulnerability to then inject your beliefs onto them.
Mhm.
I think that can be very dangerous.
I think that is the outline of the Columbo tactic by Greg Kokel.
Mm,
I think, but
yeah,
I haven't. I've only seen a few of his presentations on the subject, so I'm not an expert. Maybe I'm missing something.
yeah. Like I'd, one of the guys there at the Russia Christie group, that was his criticism, and it was a novel criticism. I've never heard of it before, where he said
Mhm.
street epistemology, um, it's philosophically devoid of meaning because it doesn't offer anything. It doesn't say you're just taking away truth and you're not giving something back. You should be
Mhm.
telling this guy
Mhm.
you're wrong and this is what you should believe. And to me, I'm like, dude, that's a feature. It's not a bug.
Right.
Can,
It's a
can,
feature. It's
can,
not a bug. Go ahead,
yeah,
Forrest.
can I ask before we get too far away from it? You mentioned, Bill, you mentioned Columbo tactic, like literally the Columbo tactic.
Yeah, literally, the book and the presentations are called the Columbo tactic, named after the character with Peter Falk, who would ask
Yeah, yeah,
lots of questions while wearing a raincoat.
yeah.
Who
And I
kind of used
also
Socratic method in a steering down a thing like a detective would.
right,
Uh,
and
yeah,
he also says I have a theory,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I have a theory. I have a hypothesis. Sure.
Well,
And
no,
as long as
I
I
would.
say, as long as I interpret theory as hypothesis, I have no trouble with that.
No, I
Go ahead.
personally believe it is a theory because a theory
Hmm.
is because his theory ends up being correct. So he's developing. He has a theory
Hmm.
that he's working on. That's why he
Yeah.
calls it that. That's why I don't really consider it. He might have an hypothesis when he first learns about the case, but then when he
Hmm.
talks to usually the bad guy, right,
Hmm.
or girl, he says, I have a theory, and he starts explaining it to him. That's one of his
Yeah.
tactics, right? See how
Yeah.
close it is.
Now this is
Indeed. Indeed.
the
Go ahead.
Columbo tactic. In terms of apologetics, so I think it was developed by a guy named Greg Kokel.
Yeah. Greg Kogel.
Um,
Hmm.
so it's not
K.
it's not yeah,
I'm
it's
not
weird.
spelling his name right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
KOKL.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah. And he is somebody who has some criticism of street epistemology, but I think on the apologetics side, he's kind of cool with it because he sees the similarities. He doesn't see it as being something which is problematic. He even one of his suggestions is if you as somebody you feel you're being targeted by a street epistemologist as to if they ask a question, just go straight to the point. Ask them, why are you asking me this? And I think that's completely fair. That's
Sure.
If somebody asked me that, I would like it because it kind of gets me into a meta discussion about, okay, so the reason I'm asking this question is because I suspect that this might be something that you believe. Let's talk about that, and let's talk about whether this question could be effective at exposing that.
Yeah. I think the difference between Kokel and SE is that he is completely ready to say, I have induced doubt. Now, here, let me tell you the thing I'm certain about that you should replace your doubt with. And that's when I've asked the question, what disqualifies something from SE, the most common answer I've gotten from experts is bringing your own position, pushing your own bias. And then on the other side, I say, for myself, the one bias I'm allowed to bring in is critical. So I am an apologist for critical. That I'm kind of allowed to do that, but not to be very pushy. Any sort of bias that I push in that regard should be really overt and should be well within rapport. And I'm only trying to make baby steps. If I can make the smallest step in the right direction and quench the Elenchus, I'm pretty happy with that day.
Yeah, and actually, if you look at it that in a way where you say SE isn't about really the belief, it's really about the epistemology.
Yeah, the individual claim can just be whatever; it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but then we are actually offering something because we are offering. We're saying, okay, we're doing an assessment to say, what's the state of your epistemology? What are the things that aren't working so well, and what are things that might work better? It's not, but we're not pushing to say this is the tool you should be using. We're just checking the ones that are there and making you make a decision for yourself. So kind of get you back into you're not offering anything away, but not completely convinced.
This is a good high note to end on. Do you have anything else you would like to tell me and my audience before we head off?
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast.
Thank you.
And I love what you're doing with the channel and growing the community. It's great.
Okay. Thank you much. This is your channel. This is Seeds of Thought SE. There's 25 or so really good interviews that I've certainly enjoyed watching, and there might be some more in the future as we go. This is one of the many channels. I think I have a dozen or maybe a baker's dozen on my list of featured channels if you go to my YouTube channels, and here's our 5 of them because that's what we can fit on the screen. If you are really interested in this topic of street epistemology, this method that we're all making this channel about, one of my favorite places where all these things are gathered is streetepistemology.com. It is a gathering place for all the stuff the community has built, and it's wikied in, and it's all sort of lovely, well organized, and that kind of thing. If you can't find it here, it's probably not about street epistemology. Anyway, this is provided by Street Epistemology International. If you would like to be a guest on my show for discussion about SE or any of the other my 8 categories that I have, all about street epistemology, I really look forward to hearing from you.